Book Review Channel, presents a review of the book by the French writer Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. The Little Prince summary of the story: the pilot met a boy traveling among the stars and became attached to him. The boy told the pilot about his journey and about his native planet, and then returned home, where a beautiful rose was waiting for him. Summary: when the pilot flew over the Sahara, his plane broke down. The pilot is a storyteller, an adult who has not lost his childish vision of the world, kind, naive, romantic. He made an emergency landing in the middle of the desert and began to repair the plane. One day, at dawn, the pilot was awakened by a little boy who came from nowhere. It was the Little Prince. The Little Prince is a boy with a pale face and golden hair, knows how to travel from planet to planet, kind, serious, impressionable, inquisitive, naive. The Little Prince, 1974. Director: Stanley Donen. Source: Odnoklassniki. The pilot became attached to the Little Prince. Talking to him, the pilot learned that he had flown from a small asteroid B612. The prince lived alone on his planet, cooking on 2 knee-high volcanoes and weeding baobab sprouts in the morning. Until one day a seed was brought to the asteroid, from which a beautiful rose grew. The little prince was delighted with the beautiful guest and fell in love with her. But the rose turned out to be proud and touchy. She tormented the little prince with her whims, and he decided to go on a long journey. The little prince in turn visited the 6 nearest asteroids, where the king, the ambitious, the drunkard, the businessman, the lamplighter and the geographer lived, and then flew to Earth. The prince landed in the middle of the Sahara and met a snake who promised to return him home with her poison when he gets bored. Then the little prince came across a whole garden of roses and realized that he was wrong and his rose is not unique. This made him very sad. But then the wise fox approached him and explained that a thing, a person or a flower must be tamed, only then they will become the only ones in the world, not like others. Fox. A fox, cunning and wise, does not like hunters, loves chickens. The little prince realized that the rose had long tamed him, because for him it was unique. He realized that he must return to the rose, and took advantage of the snake's help. In parting, the little prince gave the pilot, whom he managed to tame, his ringing laugh. The pilot will always hear it, looking at the stars. Chapter titles are arbitrary. Dedication: the author apologizes for dedicating this story to his adult friend Leon Worth. He did this to support a friend in a difficult moment. And since all adults were children at first, only few of them remember this, the author corrects himself and dedicates the book to Leon Worth when he was little. Chapter 1. Elephant in a boa constrictor. When the pilot was 6 years old, he saw in a book a picture in which a boa constrictor swallowed the beast whole. After that, the pilot drew an elephant swallowed by a boa constrictor, but the parents decided that it was a hat. Then he drew a boa constrictor from the inside. And adults advised him not to draw snakes either from the outside or from the inside, but to be more interested in geography, history, arithmetic and spelling. Adults never understand anything themselves, and for children it is very tiring to endlessly explain and interpret everything to them. The narrator no longer painted, but became a pilot and flew around the world. He lived among adults for a long time, but did not think better of them, because none of them understood that in the pilot's drawing it was not a hat, but a boa constrictor that had swallowed an elephant. Chapter 2. Meeting the Little Prince. Once the pilot made an emergency landing in the Sahara. He only had water for a week, and he hoped to fix the plane before it ran out. Somehow, at dawn, The pilot was awakened by a thin voice, asking him to draw a lamb. Jumping up, he saw an extraordinary baby, the little prince. It was not like this child was lost in the desert and dying of hunger and thirst. The pilot could not refuse him and drew an elephant in a boa constrictor, because he could not draw anything else. The little prince immediately realized that the picture was not a hat, but an elephant in a boa constrictor, and said that he only needed a lamb, because everything is very small in his house. The pilot drew several lambs, but the kid did not like any of them. Finally, the pilot drew a box in which the lamb was sitting, and the little prince was quite satisfied with this. Chapters 3–6. Asteroid B612. While talking with the little prince, the pilot found out that he had come from a small planet the size of a house. Most likely it was an asteroid. Discovered in 1909 by a Turkish astronomer. The pilot spoke in such detail about the asteroid because adults only believe in numbers, and this will convince them of the existence of the little prince. In the soil of B612, there were many baobab seeds that constantly sprouted. Huge baobabs could tear the planet apart with their roots, so the little prince weeded out their sprouts every morning. There is such a firm rule, the little prince told me after. You got up in the morning, washed your face, put yourself in order, and immediately put your planet in order. When the little prince became sad and lonely, he looked at the sunsets. The asteroid was so small that you could watch sunsets many times a day. Just move a stool. Once the prince saw 43 sunsets in a row. Chapters 7–8. Beautiful flower. On the fifth day, the little prince asked the pilot if the lamb eats flowers with thorns. The pilot was busy and angry, he could not fix the plane. But the little prince, once having asked a question, did not back down until he received an answer. He was offended that the pilot spoke to him like an adult and burst into tears. When I was 6 years old, I saw a picture one day that made an impression on me. It was from a book called True Stories from Nature that described a primeval forest. There was a picture of a boa constrictor swallowing an animal. Here's what it looked like. The book said, boa constrictors swallow their prey whole without even chewing it. It turned out that a beautiful flower with thorns grew on B612, and the baby was afraid that the lamb would eat it. The pilot consoled the little prince and promised to draw a muzzle for the lamb. The seed of this flower was accidentally brought to an asteroid. The flower turned out to be a capricious beauty. This guest was so beautiful that the little prince fell in love with her and began to faithfully look after her, water her, cover her from the wind at night with a glass cap. The guest turned out to be proud and touchy. She tormented the little prince with her whims. He decided to drop everything and go on a journey. Now the little prince understood that the flowers should not be listened to, but simply enjoyed their aroma. He regretted that he had run away from the beautiful guest. Chapters 9–15. King, ambitious, drunkard, businessman, lamplighter and geographer. The little prince cleaned up the planet, cleaned 3 volcanoes, 1 extinct and 2 active, on which he cooked food, and set off on a journey. Saying goodbye to the little prince, the beauty admitted that she also loves him. First, the little prince visited the 6 closest asteroids. On the first floor lived the king, the absolute monarch. He was delighted to see a subject. At last he could become king for at least someone. Kings look at the world in a very simplified way. For them all people are subjects. The monarch was wise and gave only those orders that his subjects could carry out. He believed that all the surrounding stars and planets were subject to him and obeyed him implicitly. When the little prince wanted to watch the sunset, the king ordered the sun to set in the evening. The little prince did not want to wait for the evening, he became bored. And he decided to continue the journey. The king asked him to stay, to become his minister, but the little prince refused. The king could not allow himself to be disobeyed, and ordered the little prince to become an ambassador. On the second planet lived an ambitious man. He mistook the little prince for his admirer, asked for a clap, and began bowing. Taking off his funny hat, the ambitious man wanted the little prince to recognize him as the most elegant, rich and smart, although he was the only inhabitant of the planet. The prince shrugged his shoulders and ran away from the ambitious man, deciding that adults are very strange people. On the third planet lived a drunkard. He was ashamed of his drinking, but continued to drink to forget about it. The prince became very sad, and he went on. The fourth planet belonged to a businessman. All day he counted the stars. The businessman was sure that he owns the stars, because so far, no one has guessed to take possession of them. He counted the stars in order to write down their number on a piece of paper and put it in the bank. The little prince said that the stars did not benefit from being owned, and went on. On the fifth planet, the smallest, there was a lantern and a lamplighter lived. He had to light the lantern in the evenings and extinguish it in the mornings. Over time, the planet began to rotate very quickly, and the lamplighter had to light and extinguish the lantern every minute. He was very tired, wanted to sleep, but he could not break the agreement and quit his job. The little prince could do nothing to help the lamplighter. Flying away, he thought that a lamplighter is better than a king, an ambitious man, a drunkard and a businessman. Because, he thinks not only about himself. On the sixth planet lived a geographer. He wrote thick books about travel, but he never traveled himself, but only wrote down other people's stories. The geographer advised the little prince to visit the planet Earth, it has a good reputation. Chapters 16 to 20. The little prince comes to Earth. The seventh planet visited by the little prince was Earth, where many thousands of kings, ambitious people, drunkards, businessmen, lamplighters and geographers lived. But the little prince landed in the Sahara and met not a man, but a snake. The snake told the prince that it had power. The people she touches return to the land they came from. But the little prince will return to where he came from. The day he regrets leaving home, she will help him. The little prince crossed the desert, climbed a high mountain, but did not find people. Finally, he came across a road that led him to a garden full of roses. Seeing them, the little prince realized that his beautiful flower was a rose, and felt very, very unhappy. His beauty told him that there was no one like her in the entire universe. And here in front of him are 5,000 exactly the same flowers in one garden alone. It turned out that he owns only an ordinary rose and 3 volcanoes as tall as his knee. What kind of prince am I after that? Thought the little prince and began to cry. Looking for a copper bus? You to us. Chapter 21. Acquaintance with the wise fox. Then the fox called out to the little prince. The prince, who was very lonely, asked the fox to play with him. The fox said he couldn't do it because he wasn't tamed yet. He explained to the little prince that to tame means to create bonds. If the prince tames the fox, they will become the only one in the world for each other. The little prince realized that the rose had tamed him and now she was the only one in the world for him, not like other roses. The fox said that his life was boring. People hunted him, and he hunted chickens. But if the little prince tames him, then the life of the fox will be lit up with love. The fox asked the prince to tame him, but he replied that he did not have time. He still needs to find friends and learn different things. The fox replied that friends also need to be recognized and tamed. People no longer have time to learn anything. They buy things ready-made in stores. But after all, there are no shops where friends would trade, and therefore people no longer have friends. The little prince agreed to tame the fox. And he explained to him that this was not a quick matter, and for this, you need to follow the rites, what distinguishes one day, hour, or minute from the rest of their kind. Gradually, the little prince tamed the fox. When it was time to say goodbye, the fox said that he would cry for the prince, but still he was fine, because now he has someone, the only one in the world. In parting, the fox revealed a secret to the little prince: only the heart is vigilant. You can't see the most important thing with your eyes. The rose is so dear to the prince because he gave her all his time, so he is responsible for her. He is forever responsible for those whom he tamed. Chapters 22 to 23. Switchman and merchant. Then the little prince met a switchman who sent trains. The prince did not understand why people travel in these trains, where they rush, what they are looking for. The switchman thought that no one knew this, not even the engineer. Then the prince met the merchant. He sold thirst-quenching pills. After one tablet, I didn't want to drink for a whole week, which saved time. The little prince thought, if he had free time, he would just go to the spring. Chapters 24 to 25. Well, in the desert, since the pilot had an accident, a week has passed and he has run out of water. He thought that the little prince does not feel hunger and thirst, therefore he does not understand what danger the pilot is exposed to. And then the prince said that he was also thirsty, because the heart also needs water, and suggested finding a well. They walked for a long time in the desert. The little prince said that the desert is good for springs hidden in it. Whether it's a house, the stars, or the desert, the most beautiful thing about them is what you can't see with your eyes. The little prince fell asleep. The pilot took him in his arms and thought that his fragile body was just a shell. The most important thing is what you cannot see with your eyes. At dawn, they came to a real village well, where there was a gate and a bucket. The little prince began to turn the gate. The well woke up and began to sing. The prince drank water, which was born from a long journey under the stars. From the creaking of the gate, from the efforts of hands, and was like a gift to the heart. Then the prince reminded the pilot of his promise to draw a lamb's muzzle and said that he had been traveling the earth for a year and it was time for him to return to his rose. He decided to use the help of the snake and stayed at the well, and sent the pilot to repair the plane. Chapters 26 to 27. Farewell to the little prince. In the morning, the pilot returned to the well and heard the little prince asking the snake if its poison was good enough and if he would not have to suffer. The pilot did not want the little prince to leave, because he managed to tame him. But the prince was waiting for his rose. The prince gave the pilot his laugh. Now, looking into the night sky, the pilot will hear the stars laughing. And this will console him, and for the prince, each star will be like a well with a creaking gate. Because every person has his own stars. At night they went to the place where the little prince had landed. There he was bitten by a snake and the baby fell to the sand. When dawn broke, the pilot did not find his body. 6 years have passed since then. The pilot repaired the plane and returned to the people. He missed the little prince very much. His only consolation was that the prince had returned home. At night, the pilot listened to the laughter of the stars and thought, "Did the lamb eat the rose?" Because he forgot to attach a strap to his muzzle. Take a look at the sky. And ask yourself, is that rose still alive or is it gone? Suddenly the lamb ate it. And you will see. Everything will be different. And no adult will ever understand how necessary it is. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell so you don't miss the next reviews.